Chapter 17, Monkey Rescue. The Legend of Sunset Shimmer, Majora's Mask. By Ganondorf 8. November 17, 2015, written, June 27, 2016, published. Chapter 17, Monkey Rescue. After being surrounded by the green aura for several minutes, I felt something inside of me, and extended out my arms. Then the feeling disappeared just as quickly as it began, but a new sensation had been unleashed, and one which felt familiar. "What did you do?" I asked. Technically, I already knew what happened, but I wanted to ask anyway in case it was a different experience than before. Adajo had since lowered her arms down before levitating down to the ground, and I finally got to see what she looked like in her current attire up close. During my previous encounters including Hyrule, she never came that close to me, as though she were cautious about my intentions. The dress reminded me of what she wore during the Battle of the Bands, but was more flowing and simplistic as opposed to the vibrant and crazy colors she had. "I have enhanced your magic power, kind young one. You can now use twice as much magic as you could before, but know that you must refill such power, otherwise it could become difficult to achieve success. I can sense an innate ability within you that has been blocked by this world's chaotic energies, but perhaps this was for the best," Adajo said. "What do you mean by chaotic energies?" "Termina is a world that is currently embroiled within a veil of chaos courtesy of the dark power that has infected every last trace of the land. This energy renders most magical powers unusable, yet some are able to be used. What you possess cannot be used, and I can sense frustration in your mind, but do not see this as a weakness. Someone like you has a strong affinity for magic, so learning to use a different kind of magic can prove to be most beneficial," Adajo answered. In her own way, she told me that not having access to my equestrian magic wasn't necessarily a bad thing, and that the magic of Termina could be just as effective. During my adventure in Hyrule, I relied on my own natural magic often, and shunned the Hylian magic that had been presented to me by the great fairies. This was my chance to make up for that mistake by using what this world had to offer, so now I looked forward to finding out what other kind of magic existed in this world. I'm sure Twilight would understand my decision, but I would cross that bridge later when the time came. For the time being, Fluttershy still needed to be returned to Tree Hugger in order to save that monkey. "This may sound like a sudden question, but what do you know of Snowhead? The mountains that reside in the northern reaches? I am afraid that I know very little about the region. I am aware that you know that long ago I once lived there, but I chose to come here to watch over the creatures here. There is another great fairy who can be found in the mountains, and I suspect that she has been shattered to pieces by the masked child. Seek out the mountain people, the Gorons, who live in Snowhead, as they know the land better than most. It may take more than just your own skills to prevail in such a frozen wasteland. You may need to channel their strength as your own," Adajo answered. "What does that even mean?" "This is something you shall figure out on your own. For now, I must return to my fountain in order to recuperate, but know that if you ever become weary from battle, please come back to see me, and I will restore both life and magic," Adajo answered, laughing as she disappeared, leaving me to try and figure out the meaning behind her words. Unlike the actual Adajo Dazzle, the ones I've encountered are far more cryptic, but then they had to be so as to not make the experience too easy. Having an extended magic meter was going to be immensely helpful, as I had need of magic more than ever, especially since my own couldn't be used while I traversed this world. "Twilight. What is it?" Twilight asked. "There's something I want to discuss with you, but it will be later once we've resolved what issues remain here in the swamp. If it has to do with what Adajo said, then I'll wait until you're comfortable enough to talk about it." Twilight smiled. It wasn't surprising to know that she knew what I was getting at, as she was someone who had dedicated her life to understanding magic, but it was a relief as it meant not stumbling with the eventual explanation. "Were you confused about what she regarding the Gorons?" "I have to channel their strength. I'm not familiar with them, but you have encountered them before, haven't you?" "They existed in Hyrule where they lived on a mountain, yet it was an active volcano. Still, these Gorons should essentially act similarly to the ones I encountered before," I answered. That's when I realized she wanted a full explanation, and I slapped my forehead. "Okay, let me tell you everything as we make our way back to the Deku Palace. From what I remember, the Gorons were a tribe who consumed rocks as part of their diet, yet only liked specific rocks. They became rather fussy as a result, and that made them an easy target for Ganondorf, who sought to starve them to death unless they gave him a spiritual stone. They ate rocks. It sounds weird, I know, but I'm telling the truth. I answered. As we left the fairy fountain, it was still night out. That made me think of getting some sleep. I had been pretty busy what with exploring a temple and defeating a powerful warrior, but I knew that I couldn't rest until Fluttershy was back where she belonged. Looking at the bottle that contained her, she had since fallen asleep. She had been through an awful lot what with being kidnapped and held against her will, but soon this ordeal of hers would come to an end. Since the poison was no longer in the water, I could jump down and swim over to where the entrance was. Just as I was about to make a leap of faith, Twilight reminded me that I would drown in my current form. I grabbed my face and took off the Deku mask, becoming human, and jumped down below, landing in the water with a loud splash that echoed throughout the area.
What else do you remember about the Gorons? They are proud warriors who were always willing to lend a hand, but their pride could be a problem, especially when it came to outsiders. I guess it made them appear weak, and that's something they couldn't afford to have happen, as it gave other tribes a reason to question them. Aside from that, they were experts in explosives, as they created bombs that were sold to Hylians in exchange for certain goods and services.
I answered. The monsters had since taken notice of me, and how could they not, since I made a loud splash, yet they ignored me, probably due to not violating their territory. I was glad actually, as I didn't want to get involved in any fighting.
The Gorons sound very friendly. Provided you talk to them when they are in a good mood, that is. Oh. They have an attitude problem. Let's just say that they've got a lot of passion.
I answered, breathing heavily because I knew exactly what I was talking about. Back in the main area of swamp, I took a moment to observe my surroundings to see what had changed since Odolway's defeat, and what became quickly obvious was the water. No longer was there any poison, so I was free to traverse it. The monsters were still around. That felt disappointing, as I was expecting them to have gone away upon things returning to normal, but I guess there was still darkness that needed to be conquered.
Twilight? What did you think of Principal Celestia being one of the 4 giants who protect this world?
I asked.
It's like a dream come true, despite her being the human version of our mentor. You always did like that about her, didn't you? Princess Celestia taught me everything I needed to know to become my own pony. I sometimes wish that I stayed inside of Go Off on my own. Not a day goes by that I continue to blame myself for everything that went wrong between us.
I said.
You were just going through a phase. No, it wasn't like that.
I said, coming to a stop in the water and floating in place.
My family always ignored me in favor of my siblings, and I felt rejected because of that. I wanted to prove that I could be the best unicorn Equestria had ever known, and I began a dark path that only ended when you and our friends finally stopped me. I'm sure Princess Celestia has forgiven you by now, Sunset. I have said good things about you to her, but you need to one day find the courage to speak to her in person.
Twilight said.
I want to, but I'm afraid I'll be arrested and banished to the desolate wastes for stealing your crown. Don't worry, Sunset. I'll make sure that doesn't happen. I know you'll have my back when the time comes for me to confront her anyway. This isn't the first time Celestia has appeared in a scenario like this, where she appeared as a deity. While her human self appeared here, her pony self appeared as a deity in Hyrule.
I said.
Really? You know I'm going to ask you, tell me, Sunset.
Twilight said. Knowing that I couldn't deny her request, I began to explain myself while I continued swimming towards the shore and the Deku Palace. I told her in Hyrule, Princess Celestia was one of the great goddesses, ethereal beings who created Hyrule in addition to forging the Triforce that contained their essence. This power could grant anyone's desires, and because of that, many sought to claim the golden power for themselves. Ganondorf was one of those who coveted the Triforce in order to become the most powerful being, so through manipulation, deceit, treachery, and more, he was able to get his hands on it.
So that's what he did? I've got a feeling there is more to it than that, but it's a difficult story to tell as there's much that you don't know about.
Twilight said.
No, I know what happened. Really? Then why not explain the rest of it? It would involve talking about time paradoxes, as the actions of certain individuals created 3 different timelines. Time magic? Seriously? It has nothing to do with magic, but rather events playing out differently. This timeline is the one where the hero of time defeated Ganondorf, but returned to the past by returning the Master Sword to its place of rest. Ganondorf never conquered Hyrule, and was subsequently arrested and charged with treason, with the punishment being his execution. The second timeline follows the events of the future, where he was imprisoned within the sacred realm with the Triforce of power in his hand. Finally, there's the timeline where the hero was killed in battle and Ganondorf claimed the complete Triforce before being banished.
I said.
Sounds to me that there's more to it than that. You have no idea.
I said. She really didn't. I've read what happened in each timeline in the Hyrule Historia. While most who read it wouldn't think too much of it because it was just a video game, I saw it as more towards being part of my existence given how I've become intertwined within the narrative of this legend. I was in the role of the hero who had been chosen to defeat the darkness, so it fell onto me to carry out the task that has been assigned to me whether I liked it or not. Was my being chosen to fulfill this part predetermined a long time ago, or did Ganondorf have something to do with it? Maybe my troubled past was the key factor that made me the prime candidate? I thought of it like that as a small portion of me had started to consider what might happen were the roles reversed. What I meant was, what if Twilight was the one chosen instead of me? What if the role of partner was given to me instead? How would both of us behave in our respective roles that's different from our current ones? Another thought that crossed my mind was the villainous role this game possessed. That could have been how I ended up were Twilight to have been chosen instead of me. I've had experience playing the bad girl that even now continued to torment me despite my attempts to move on. Just thinking about such alternate possibilities frightened me to no end, and I hoped that I'd never see such a thing happen. I'd hate for something like that to happen where I have to fight against those who truly care about me. It didn't take long to make my way back to the Deku Palace. Again, I felt the urge to fall asleep due to how exhausted I felt, but I had to keep on going for Fluttershy's sake. She was the only one who could save that monkey from being punished. Originally, I assumed that seeing her daughter would be enough for Tree Hugger to get involved, but I don't think those advisors would be willing to stop what they were trying to achieve. From what I gathered from the Deku Queen, she was more interested in maintaining her aura as opposed to ruling over the Deku, and her advisors constantly took advantage of this by convincing her to follow their suggestions.
Mrs. Sunset Shimmer?
Fluttershy asked.
I see you're awake. That was a really nice sleep despite my cramped quarters, but I was wondering if we've reached the palace. We arrived just a few moments ago. Such relief as I feel like I have been trapped inside of this bottle forever. I do apologize for falling asleep, but being trapped inside of your bottle made me tired. Also, my concern over the well-being of that poor monkey stressed me out, so I decided that resting would allow me to calm my nerves. Please Mrs. Sunset Shimmer, you must head for the throne room where my mother is.
Fluttershy said.
Will you resolve things? I have no other choice but I was hoping that my mother would be able to resolve it.
Fluttershy answered. I rolled my eyes to what she said as it was a typical response. Even in this world, Fluttershy didn't like being confrontational, and preferred someone else do all of the talking for her, yet she had no other choice as the fate of an innocent animal was on the line. Since she had such a strong affinity towards animals, there was no doubt she was going to make things right for the monkey. Walking through the entrance and entering the outside section of the palace, things still looked the same apart from the clear water, yet ahead of me were the two Deku guards I had trouble with before during my last visit. It still bothered me that no other guards were on patrol as it meant this area had next to no defense, but I suppose there may be hidden Deku somewhere around here.
The guards are still there, I said. Remember that due to resetting time, they no longer know who you are,
said Twilight.
Positive?
I asked.
Of course, and it means your actions have been forgotten by them as well. In the minds of the Deku scrubs who live in the palace, you are someone who is paying a visit who came all the way from Clock Town, and none of them will suspect something is amiss. You'll need to change forms though as non-Deku can't go inside, those guards are persistent in that regard.
Twilight answered.
What about Her Highness? You need to make your way to Tree Hugger's throne, and empty your bottle next to her. She won't recognize her. I have no idea as to her depth perception, but that's what you must do.
Twilight answered. That meant having to deal with those advisors, yet they too didn't remember ever seeing me. I could easily make my way up to Tree Hugger, but I had to remember that there were other Deku in the throne room. If I made a blunder, I could be swamped by them all over again, and be punished myself. Of course, Twilight also mentioned the part about needing to change forms. I took the Deku mask out from my pocket but not before putting the bottle down that contained Fluttershy, and placed it on my face where the magic began to change me again. Upon letting out a loud scream, I had become a Deku scrub once again. When I picked up the bottle, Fluttershy stared at me in disbelief. I sensed she was surprised that a human that changed into her own kind.
This ability to transform your shape is amazing.
Fluttershy said.
It does come in handy, but the pain can be annoying at times.
I said.
You experience agony. When one's body changes completely, you'll feel considerable pain until you either get used to it, or not. That sounds awful. It does, yet I need to constantly do this to move one step closer towards saving this world from impending doom.
I said. An idea then appeared in my mind the moment I said those words. Looking at the night sky and seeing the moon overhead with its monstrous face, I looked back down at Fluttershy before continuing.
Do your people know about what's currently falling from above? The moon? Yes, we have seen it slowly descending, yet we never took it seriously as we were content with our own business. In our minds, those humans would figure out something, yet they haven't come up with a solution. My mother thinks the moon is expressing so much negativity that its chakra has come to a grinding halt. She may not look like it, but she has the ability to sense people's auras that she uses to determine someone's nature.
Fluttershy answered.
Tree Hugger must be proud of that. Who? No one.
I answered, covering my mouth so as to not say anything else.
You called her Tree Hugger? You know, that name sounds so much nicer than Deku Queen. That is what most of our subjects call her, yet she doesn't like titles as she doesn't take such traditions all that seriously.
Fluttershy said. In my mind, I made a blunder by referring to the Deku Queen as Tree Hugger. I needed to be more mindful of what words came out of my mouth. Picking up the bottle, I made my way over to the two guards who immediately commanded me to stop. One thing that was imperative was that they didn't see the bottle containing their princess, otherwise they might think I kidnapped her.
This is the palace of the Deku Kingdom. Only those on official business may enter.
I was about to remind them that I had been here before, but I quickly remembered that neither of them recognized me.
I've never seen the likes of you around here before. Do you happen to have come all this way from Clock Town? I suppose you could say that.
I answered.
Figures you came from there. Normally, that would mean asking you to leave because you big city Deku think too highly of yourselves, but for today, I'll make an exception to that rule. What's going on?
I asked, pretending to have no idea.
I'm not surprised that you Deku from Clock Town are so oblivious to the tragedy that has befallen our kingdom. After all, you lot left here because you all thought there was nothing for you, so by leaving this swamp, you hoped to start a better life elsewhere.
The guard was taking tremendous offense to my words, just like what happened before, but he quickly regained his composure.
Sorry about that. I've just been under a lot of stress ever since the Deku princess disappeared several days ago.
I quickly looked down at Fluttershy, and she knew to be quiet, otherwise I could be arrested.
What happened to Her Highness? Normally, I wouldn't tell commoners of such important matters, but the Deku Queen has permitted it. You see, the Deku princess went with a monkey up to the Woodfall Temple, and only that beast returned, which devastated our kingdom. The advisors believe she was captured, and the one responsible for her abduction was that monkey. The Deku Queen doesn't believe the monkey was responsible, yet she had been convinced by her advisors to carry out an appropriated punishment. That sounds horrible. Perhaps, but I'm just a guard, so my opinion holds no value. Anyway, you may enter to see the public humiliation of the foolish monkey who angered our queen. Does her anger have to do with her advisors? Just between you and me, I never did like those four for the sole reason that they are corrupt. They've been wanting to have the queen be more serious about the affairs of the kingdom, yet she prefers to rule through kindness and her ability to sense the auras within those who grace her presence. Many of us are well aware that her advisors have grander aspirations that do involve assuming control, yet none of us have ever tried to expose their true intentions as they hold powerful positions. The Deku Queen may or may not be aware of what they do, and if she did, she could never do something about it because the four of them used to be advisors to her husband.
That was something I didn't know before until now, and it started to make this whole situation less confusing than it had been before. No wonder Tree Hugger had problems. In Equestria, the only rulers ponies had ever known were Princess Celestia and Princess Luna, and while their reign had had its ups and downs, every pony was happy because they always had their best interests. We didn't know any other ruler, so the thought of some pony one day replacing them was virtually unheard of. In the case of Tree Hugger, she had assumed the throne after her husband passed away, according to this Deku, and that meant having to take on the baggage known as the royal advisors. I'm guessing that they were fiercely loyal towards the previous king, and never were happy when she took on the task of solo ruler. No wonder Tree Hugger hid behind the whole sensing of auras, and had such a peaceful outlook on life. She's had to deal with a problem she didn't want, but then the question I wanted to know was, how did her husband react around her advisors? Did he possess similar convictions? Or, did he treat them like they were his own children? The answer was one that would be difficult to discover. While I could easily talk to Tree Hugger about it, I wasn't sure she would be willing to listen. This was an example of how those who closely served the monarchy were secretly gaining more power by taking advantage of them, and when the proper time came, they would overthrow the monarchy to establish a new rule. Just because you think that you could be a good ruler meant absolutely nothing if you didn't have the support of your subjects. Princess Celestia and Princess Luna knew this was true, but never once did anything that would have their ponies want to oust them.
Couldn't she dismiss them?
I asked. I figured that perhaps this guard knew the answer, and would tell me what it was rather than having to ask Tree Hugger.
Quite easily, as the queen has her own way of doing things compared to her husband. But the problem is that the advisors have far too much power, so dismissing them would be rather difficult. In any case, we've been talking long enough, and you are most likely anxious to see that monkey with your own eyes. Besides, I need to get back to work, otherwise I could get in trouble for neglecting my duties as a guard. Follow this hall straight to the royal chamber. Do not enter any other areas whatsoever.
Since I explored those areas already, I could just go straight to the royal chamber without being distracted, and Fluttershy was most likely being impatient what with having listened to my conversation with this guard. Thanking the guard for the conversation, he allowed me to proceed, and I walked immediately towards the royal chamber. I then just realized that Fluttershy knew more about this situation given she was the Deku princess after all. However, I needed to be quick as I doubted she could last much longer inside of my bottle.
Before we go inside the royal chamber, I was wondering how you feel about the advisors to your mother. Those four? I've never really been too fond of them for as long as I can remember. They always wanted my mother to be more like my father. When he was alive, my father ruled over the Deku kingdom with an iron fist, and was prone to temper tantrums over the most trivial of things. If even the smallest thing were to bother him, he would lose control of his emotions. He always said that it was his passion that made him overreact, and the advisors enjoyed every minute of it.
Fluttershy said.
And then he passed away. My father wilted about 5 years ago, and it shook the entire kingdom to its foundation. Many Deku were devastated over his death because it meant their interests when it came to the other tribes were now in jeopardy. Others felt relieved knowing that my mother was planning on ruling on her own, and had a much more peaceful way of doing things that would let us be seen as being on equal terms with everyone else across Termina. It was the senior Deku scrubs who were against my mother, as they wanted to maintain our usual nature of forging alliances, and breaking them in order to protect our own interests. The younger generation favored the peaceful approach my mother desired, and right from the start, her ideals conflicted with those of the advisors.
Fluttershy answered.
So it's a case of the old versus the young. Something like that, I suppose. In some ways, I'm actually jealous. Why would you be? Where I really come from, we have a ruler who has guided our fair land for over 1,000 years, and not once has she ever had anyone attempt to overthrow her, with the sole exception of her younger sister. She became corrupted by darkness out of jealousy, and was imprisoned in the moon for the same 1,000-year period, yet returned to the side of her older sister and became CO rulers. She ruled solely through kindness, understanding, and a general desire to protect her subjects.
I answered.
It must be nice to have someone like that who doesn't have advisors hounding her by the roots.
Fluttershy said. Hearing her say those words made me feel regretful, as though I had been boasting about how Equestria was superior to both the Deku Kingdom, and Termina overall. That wasn't my intention by any means. The more I became adjusted to my new surroundings, the more troubled I became because of how miserable everything around me was. No wonder so many people felt such negativity, as they were surrounded by it on a regular basis, and coupled with the moon falling, I fear they were on the verge of giving up and wanting to submit to eternal destruction. It was up to me to resolve this issue before things spiraled out of control. Even though just thinking about having to save an entire world by myself with Twilight by my side made me feel sick, I had to complete my task no matter what I had to go through.
Mrs. Sunset Shimmer. What is it? Can we go inside now? I'm starting to feel really cramped. Oh, right.
I said, blushing because I had completely forgotten that she was still inside of my bottle. I made my way across the courtyard, entered the royal chamber, and suddenly came to a stop upon seeing what transpired since my previous visit. A rather crude-looking apparatus was situated above a cauldron, smoke rising from it indicated that it had been filled with hot liquid. Tied up by his feet and hanging from below the apparatus was the monkey. He was still insisting that he hadn't done anything to the Deku princess, yet his pleas fell on deaf ears. This was true as she was now with me, but I had to make it over to Tree Hugger as only she could set all of this right. Looking around to see where I could find her, there were a large assortment of Deku scrubs prancing about. The 4 advisors, the ones who had practically instigated this display, were standing at the back of the chamber, grinning with glee that all of this was happening to their left. Sitting on her throne with a miserable look on her face, was Tree Hugger. Clearly, she didn't like what was going on, yet I'd bet she had been told by those advisors that this was necessary to appease her subjects who demanded satisfaction. To get over to her, I had to weave my way through these Deku, but be casual about it, otherwise those advisors might suspect me of being suspicious, and that could prevent Fluttershy from being reunited with her mother. I then started to walk forward, making sure not to cause a scene, and none of the Deku bothered to take notice of me. At least that was one problem out of the way. The other would involve how I dealt with those advisors.
Hey! You're like a new face I've never seen around here before.
Tree Hugger said as I approached her. I could tell that she wasn't joyous like before, but again I had to play my hand carefully to avoid any suspicion.
I just came here recently from Clock Town,
I said.
Whoa! That's totally gnarly. It's not often that we get any of our fellow Deku from Clock Town. Most of them choose to stay there and never associate with us, but I suppose they have their reasons for not wanting to come back.
Tree Hugger said, looking at her advisors for a brief second before turning her attention back to me.
I am the Deku Queen, but I like the title of she who can sense the aura of those who approach her. It has a real nice ring to it, wouldn't you agree? Sorry if I sound rather miserable, but my chakra has been totally messed up lately, what with my daughter disappearing. My advisors have said that this monkey is the one who kidnapped her, yet I can't accept such a thing as the truth. Why not? I can sense the aura coming from that little fellow, and he gives off a radiant glow, much like you are right now. You must be someone who possesses a strong life force to make someone like me coil back.
Tree Hugger answered.
If you strongly feel that way about it, why not release the monkey? My people want justice to be done, otherwise it would destroy our societal fabric just like that.
Tree Hugger answered, snapping her fingers in response to her last word. I then took notice of her advisors who began looking at me with anger in their faces. They didn't want me talking about freeing the monkey, so I had to do this carefully, otherwise Fluttershy would never be reunited with her mother. So far, no one knew that she was with me, and she made certain not to say anything until I had released her from my bottle. I then turned to Twilight, who had also been silent. She nodded her head indicating that she would back me up on how I handled this problem. I just needed to steer the conversation towards the right direction.
Do you know where she went? She went to that Woodfall Temple. I don't know why she would want to visit such a run-down place, but she never returned. The monkey returned, and that's where all of these accusations began. To be honest, the temple is not really that big of a deal unless you have a strong inkling to want to pay a visit to the Guardian.
Tree Hugger answered.
If your daughter returned, what would happen? The monkey would be released immediately. No matter what. For a Deku scrub who comes from Clock Town, you certainly are the curious type. I like that about you. Most of the Deku in here just nod their heads in approval whenever I say something, and it really bums me out and weakens my chakra because they don't have an actual opinion. Sometimes, I just wonder why I even rule over this kingdom to being with.
Tree Hugger answered. That was the signal I needed to hear, and that meant I had to act quickly. However, the advisors looked at me again before deciding to approach, and I knew they didn't like me asking questions.
Your Majesty. This Deku child certainly is suspicious. What makes you think that?
Tree Hugger asked.
She seems very interested with regards to the Deku princess, as though she were hiding something. Not only that, she is undermining your authority by claiming this monkey should be released. You know that he must be punished for his actions. If justice isn't delivered, your people would surely riot, and our way of life would come apart at the seams. Do not let this city Deku scrub coerce you into acting out against the wishes of your people. Or, she may have been born in that human city, and thinks she can strut around your kingdom as though she were entitled to. Whoa! Why do you four have to have such negative vibes?
Tree Hugger asked.
Sometimes, we question it ourselves. In any case, the punishment must be delivered, yet we shall await your command, your Majesty. We shall act when you say so. For the good of my people, the monkey will be punished within the next few moments. I am so sorry little monkey, but I have no other choice here. I've protected you as long as I could, but I fear that I've run out of time. If my daughter were here right now, my chakra would be restored to the way they were before. I know this is going to be terrible karma that strikes me, yet I must act for the good of the kingdom.
Tree Hugger said. While she was busy with that little tirade, I removed the bottle from around my belt, uncorked it, and began shaking it.
Hey! What are you doing, little Deku child?
Tree Hugger had taken notice of my actions, yet I continued to shake it until Fluttershy emerged, landing right in front of her mother with a soft thud.
Deku princess? Is that, like you, or has my chakra really taken a nosedive? It's me.
Fluttershy answered.
Why are you shivering like that? Because, I need to do something very important. By all means. Huff. Foolish mother.
Fluttershy said, her calm demeanor suddenly changing to one of anger.
What are you talking about? I didn't want to do this, but you've left me no other choice, mother.
Fluttershy answered. She then suddenly leapt at Tree Hugger, knocking her down onto her back, and began bouncing up and down on her belly in a fit of anger. It reminded me of what Twilight once told me about the equestrian version of Fluttershy. She would lose control of her emotions whenever an animal was threatened in any way, resulting in her becoming very assertive. She also had an ability called the Stare that allowed her to force any creature to obey her without question. It sounded like a useful, if terrifying power, especially if she were to use it to her advantage, but I doubted Fluttershy would ever do that. Her sudden course of action caused every other Deku scrub to stop what they were doing, and looking on at their princess. Even the monkey, who had pleaded for his release, looked on in surprise.
Mother! Why did you allow yourself to be persuaded by your advisors without taking everything into account? You're supposed to be in charge, not them. I did, dear daughter, yet they insisted that the monkey be punished for the good of our people. And you went with it. Our people demanded justice, and I had to carry it out. I can't believe that I'm hearing this.
Fluttershy shouted as she stopped bouncing on her mother's belly. She then turned to face the other Deku scrub with such a horrifying expression on her face, they shuddered in fear before backing away slightly. Was this the power of her stare at work? It was impressive to say the least, yet it made her appear as though she were a monster. Good thing I wasn't a victim, otherwise I'd be scared of her as well. She then turned her attention towards the advisors, who had since cowered themselves into a corner. Each one tried pushing one another out in front to take the full brunt of what was about to happen next.
And you four? How dare you manipulate my mother into doing something so barbaric as punishing an innocent creature? My father's methods of punishment were both archaic and wrong, and that is why they were abolished when my mother chose to rule on her own. But they had to be retained for the good of the kingdom. No. We have done nothing but act in a deceitful manner against the other tribes in addition to relying on outdated ideals, so I am only going to say this to you for once and only once, so listen carefully. I don't want any of you to ever assert your influence on my mother ever again. From now on, you shall respect her way of doing things, and accept them because that is your duty. No longer will my mother and I tolerate your actions because of how her ideals conflict with yours. Have I made myself clear on this matter?
Fluttershy asked. The advisors didn't answer her, and that only made her raise her voice in anger.
Have I made myself clear? Yes, Deku Princess. We shall obey. No longer will we persuade your mother to act against her own ideals. Please don't punish us. Thank you.
Fluttershy said.
And the monkey? Let him go this instant.
Fluttershy answered. I never knew that she could exude so much anger, but the advisors had it coming what with their actions. Throughout this experience, I knew that Tree Hugger wasn't at fault because the responsibilities of being a ruler forced her hand, and she had no choice but to carry out such a horrific act for her people. No wonder Equestria was always so peaceful aside from when it was threatened by those who desired to conquer it. A short time later, after the monkey had been set free, and the advisors contemplating their berating, Fluttershy approached the monkey before bowing down before him.
I am truly sorry for what happened you Mr. Monkey. My mother didn't mean to make you suffer like that, as she had been tempted by her advisors to punish you. She can be very protective of me at times when it comes to my well-being, so she has been known for listening to some rather rash decisions. I understand, Princess. Forget about that. Has the temple been returned to normal? Why yes, thanks to Mrs. Sunset Shimmer here. She braved the many dangers that resided in the temple, including the monster that had imprisoned me, so for that I am very, truly grateful. You need not worry about the advisors anymore. They have been put in their place and will no longer try to influence my mother.
Fluttershy answered. She then reached out and grabbed my hand before pulling me forward to be properly thanked by the monkey. I wasn't the sort of person who wanted to be given any credit, what with how I used to behave. I could be tempted by evil desires, so I tried refusing Fluttershy's request, yet she wouldn't have any of it.
Really? So you're called Sunset Shimmer, are you? Thank you for keeping your promise to me. I know that we've only just met, but I felt compelled to say that, as though I met you in another time and place.
The monkey was a lot closer than he thought in that regard, but it was for the best that he didn't know the truth. It could prove rather complicated.
As a symbol of our gratitude, our butler has prepared a little something for you.
Fluttershy said. It had just dawned on me that Mrs. Cheerilee was nowhere to be found, and she was usually standing next to Tree Hugger ready to serve her at a moment's notice. Where in the world could she have gotten to? My reaction to her announcement made Fluttershy giggle, and she told me to calm down before I ended up with drooped leaves.
Our Deku butler was here before you arrived, but decided on waiting for you in a special place that is sacred to us. Most Deku aren't permitted to enter the Deku shrine unless they have permission from my mother. Yet, since she is currently overjoyed with her chakra upon seeing my safe return, I shall give you permission instead. Please accept the gift that we have prepared, Mrs. Sunset Shimmer, but, don't be shocked at what you'll get. What do you mean? When I first witnessed your transformation between a Deku scrub and a human, I suspected that you possessed other masks in your possession, so I made certain arrangements some time ago. You see, we Deku have been guarding a special mask for many generations, yet not once have we ever used it because we had no need to. My father actually considered getting rid of it as it creeped him out, but my mother insisted we kept it. She knew that one day, someone would come along and claim it, one would possess other masks, and had the ability to change their shape.
Fluttershy answered. At first, I was wondering why she had lowered her voice, but I quickly figured out that she didn't want anyone else to know that I wasn't an actual Deku scrub. Were they to know that truth, I'd be captured almost instantly, so it was for the best to remain in my current form.
Where is the shrine? When you leave this chamber, make your way to the moat, and then cross the lily pads to your right. The Deku shrine will be at the end of the path, but I must warn you. It's not exactly what one might call an actual shrine. In truth, it is a long, winding tunnel that goes deep underground, and if you're not careful, you may find yourself getting lost down there. Do not worry though. Our Deku butler is sure to guide you along. After all, she knows her way around down there better than anyone, and besides, it seems she has taken somewhat of a liking to you, Mrs. Sunset Shimmer.
Fluttershy answered.
Are you sure you don't need my help for anything? I know that things had gotten hectic around here with my absence, but I think we shall be fine from now on. My mother's advisors have now learned their place, and should hopefully not aspire to influence her in the future. As for you, I sense that you'll be needed elsewhere in this world. The other regions are calling out to you, and while the challenges within those places will prove difficult, I know that you will succeed.
Fluttershy answered. She then noticed the hero's bow on my back, and that made no sense as I already figured out that I couldn't use it in my current form, but her eyes suddenly widened in excitement.
That weapon you have there. It was hidden inside of Woodfall Temple for the Chosen One to wield it someday, and that day has finally come. It was being guarded by a fiery lizardman, so I defeated it and claimed it for my own. I see. If I hadn't taken it, I wouldn't have been able to save you. It was meant to be in your possession, and I couldn't be more proud of that. That weapon has been in the Deku royal family for many generations, but my great-great-grandfather chose to hide it inside of the temple believing it would be safer there. I must admit that it does really suit you, Mrs. Sunset Shimmer.
Fluttershy said.
No offense, but I can't really use a bow looking like this. I know. What? If you knew that, then why have such a weapon hidden away in a sacred place to your people? The hero's bow was given to one of my ancestors long ago by a human who bore such a strong resemblance to yourself. As I said, my family has guarded it for generations until it was placed in the temple. My ancestor was also told that one day, another human would come along and claim the weapon for themselves. This human would have the power to change their shape at will, and possess arcane powers that are beyond anything imaginable.
Fluttershy answered.
You believe I'm that human? Yes, otherwise you would not be in possession of it. That does make sense. Always treasure that weapon.
I soon came to accept that I was the one who had been chosen to wield the hero's bow, but what about the human who supposedly looked like me who gave the bow to the Deku long ago? Was that a coincidence? Fate? Or perhaps something much more? In either case, it actually wasn't significant with the exception that it gave me more of an understanding as to the history behind Termina. I still was clueless regarding many legends, but at least I had something to rely on for future reference. I would have gone back to Clock Town to prepare myself for the long journey to the next region, but first I had to make a detour as there was a mask I needed.
Any further questions? No, I'm good. Then it's time for you to take your leave of us, Mrs. Sunset Shimmer. I don't know why, but it feels like I've known you for a very long time despite only knowing you for about a few hours. I hope that one day, we will meet again. Before you go, make sure to speak to the monkey in case he has something to say. I would ask you to speak to my mother, but that probably won't be necessary as she's still trying to realign her chakra due to my return.
Fluttershy said. Smiling and thanking her for everything she had done, I started walking back towards the monkey, but then she beckoned me stop as she had one last thing to say.
I shall never forget what you have done for us. Also, please forgive me if I refuse to ride in that tiny, little bottle ever again. I am not going to be missing that experience anytime soon.
That certainly must have been awkward considering how she had to be carried around, but I respected her wishes. The monkey was in the center of the chamber near the cauldron and he turned his attention towards me when I approached him.
Sunset Shimmer, I'm sorry for all that trouble. I didn't mean to drag you into such affairs like this. It's okay. This was something I really needed to do. Really? Well, I'm glad that you benefited from this experience. What will happen now? Now it looks like we monkeys and Deku can start getting along again. A lot of damage has been done no thanks to those advisors, and the monster who had kidnapped the Deku princess, but in time things should slowly go back to normal like they were before. We certainly owe a great deal of gratitude towards you, Sunset Shimmer, and for that, we declare you an honorary monkey.
I smiled in response, but deep in my mind, that thought made me shiver.
You know, the swamp may be back to normal, but something still gives me a bad feeling. I wonder what it could be? I'm probably thinking too hard about it, so pay me no mind.
The monkey had no idea as to how right he really was, yet once I've reset time, none of this would even matter to him. That's because when I restart the cycle, everything will go back to the way it was before I showed up. He will be getting punished, Fluttershy will be trapped once again, and Tree Hugger would be at the mercy of her advisors. The very thought wounded my grieving heart, but I knew that I had to restart to give myself more time to rescue the four giants. Thanking the monkey as well, I immediately took my leave of the royal chamber, but not before looking over my back towards those advisors who had since huddled into a corner. Each of them were looking right back at me, expressions of hatred filled their eyes, and they most likely blamed me for being punished by Fluttershy. Yet, they deserved it for all of the horrible things they did. Once I left the chamber and walked up to the moat, a light tapping occurred on my shoulder.
Where to now?
Twilight asked.
It's been a while since you last said anything. I wanted to hold back while allowing you some much-needed space. You didn't really need to do that. Think of it as a learning experience for when the day comes where you'll become a princess. That won't be happening anytime soon,
I said. I wasn't sure why Twilight said that. I mean, it was my dream to ascend to such a lofty position, but because of my troubled past, I didn't think I deserved it. I knew I've done good lately, but what happened in Equestria is pretty hard to ignore. One day, I'll go back home and face my just punishment for stealing of one Equestria's national treasures, but for now I was content with trying to figure out how to change this world back to normal.
Anyway, we should focus on getting that mask Mrs. Chiruli has in this shrine of theirs. Adajo did mention that a mask was in the possession of the Deku. Why not just give it to me? I don't think they can just do that for a complete stranger. Nothing ever is easy to accomplish, is it? Guess we might as well make our way over there,
I said. I was thinking of crossing as a human as that meant walking slowly up to my knees in water, but because this was still the Deku Palace, there might be additional guards lurking about in the shadows. They would react badly if they were to suddenly see a human walking about.
You shouldn't have any trouble using those lily pads. I'm hoping this mask will be worth it,
I said, moaning. I then began to make my way across to the Deku shrine using the lily pads as platforms, and unlike the other direction, this pathway was much easier as there were more lily pads. Around the halfway point, I looked upwards to see if it was still nightfall. It was, meaning that I would soon require some sleep. After all, I had been on my feet since starting this 3-day cycle without taking the time to rest. Maybe Miss Cheerily would allow me to sleep for about 7 or 8 hours before giving me that mask she supposedly had. Truth be told, I'd prefer to sleep for an entire day given what I went through in Woodfall Temple, but I still had additional tasks to perform. Once I made it across, I found myself standing in front of the entrance to the Deku Shrine, and it wasn't what I expected. I was expecting it to be something glorified, a strong representation of the might of the Deku Kingdom, yet it was rather lackluster. Also, why have something this important tucked away where no one could gain access to it? Then again, I suspected there had to be another entrance inside the palace. How else could anyone get over here, especially if they didn't have any jumping skills? Walking inside, everything went dark as though no one had been here for centuries, yet I could smell the history all around me. A few torches in front of me was the only means of light, but it was enough to allow me to see any details. The walls were decorated with various murals that depicted ancient histories of the Deku, but these impressive designs made no sense to me. It then dawned on me that perhaps, I should have taken the time to read the Hyrule Historia section dedicated to Termina.
It sure is dark in here. I can light the way using my, well, light. We do have these torches, Twilight. I know, but you can never be too careful. Where do you suppose we'll find Miss Cheerily? Hard to say around here since everything is so dark, but I'm sure we'll find her eventually. Despite being a different person in this world, Fluttershy wouldn't lie to us just to be rid of us.
Twilight answered. I knew our friend wouldn't have lied. If she said we were to come here to claim a mask, then that is what we've done. I still didn't understand why I'm even collecting them in the first place considering I've only used 2 of them at the most, yet Adajo was insistent on it. Otherwise, why would she have brought them up? After walking forward up a small flight of stairs, I came upon a small clearing and saw something in the distance. Someone else was in here with me, lurking about in the shadows. Walking a little further, the figure turned out to be Miss Cheerily, holding what appeared to be an umbrella in her hand. How was she able to get here?
I've been expecting you,
Mrs. Cheerily said.
What is this place?
I asked.
It seems the Deku Princess did not explain that little tidbit to you, so permit me to tell you. The Deku Shrine is a sacred place where those who have wilted are buried here so that they can return from whence they came. It doesn't matter what your status in life was. If you wilted, this is where you come. Despite this region being nothing more than a swamp, it is our haven where we have lived since ancient times. This place also serves another function, and that involves racing.
Mrs. Cheerily answered.
Did you say, racing? Think of it as a rite of passage among my kind. When a Deku scrub is ready to become an adult, they must take this test to see if they are worthy enough.
Mrs. Cheerily answered.
And me? No, I am aware of what you truly are. I had long sensed that you weren't a Deku scrub even though you stand before me as one. You possess a powerful magic to be able to perform such a feat as this. As far as I am concerned, you are one of my kind, and so you can perform the rite. You've come here to claim the precious mask that we Deku have been guarding for generations. I shall lead you to it as your reward for rescuing the Deku Princess.
Mrs. Cheerily answered.
Why not give it to me now? To do that would mean you did not truly earn it. I guess that makes sense. All you need to do is keep up with me as best as you can as I lead you through the dark recesses of this shrine. There are many twists and turns that lie ahead, and should you fall behind, I fear that the dark creatures shall claim their food.
Mrs. Cheerily said. Her description of this shrine completely changed my opinion of it. I thought she would simply hand over the mask as a reward for all of that hard work, but she had an ulterior motive. I should have known this was going to happen. Nothing was ever earned for free. It had to be earned by completing some kind of trial, yet my mind was blinded by the thought of getting my hands on whatever mask Mrs. Cheerily had. So, if you are ready, I shall lead the way, and don't think of me as being weak just because I'm older than you. You would be surprised at how fast I can really be. I actually want to make a request. A request? You see, I've been working hard non-stop since the crack of dawn, and I've yet to get some sleep because of it. So, would it be okay if I rest for a few hours? I know it's very impractical since you need to return to your queen's side what with being her butler and all. Yet, I really need to sleep otherwise I'm likely to keel over while attempting this challenge. I answered.
Very well. Hey. I accept your request. Thank you. Rest now, for when you awaken, we shall see if you have what it takes to earn this mask.
End of chapter.